Hello, everyone. This is Coach Tim Campsell, and I'm excited to have a fellow business owner with us today. Something unique about my guest is he started in the industry as a maintenance man, and look how far he's come. That is cool. In his downtime, he loves to ride his bike and hunt, and he is most proud of his amazing kids, which we will have him tell us a little bit about here in a minute. It is my pleasure to welcome Glenn to the show today. Hi, Glenn.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me. I'm pretty excited.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. So tell us your full name and a little of your personal story, like where you were born and live and about your family.
Sure. My name's Glenn Gonzales. Last name Gonzales with an S. Can't speak a lick of Spanish. I live in Texas. I'm even involved with maintenance and landscape, and I still can't speak Spanish, so it's no bueno. People make fun of me all the time. So I might not be a true Texan to say it in some people's mind. I'm originally from Riverside, California, is where I was born and raised. And then during my high school years, teenagers, my parents moved up to Barstow, California, which some people would call that the armpit of California. But there wasn't a whole lot going on in Barstow. But I did run cross country and track when I was there and was on the swim team and played tennis. So very kind of active in high school. And it's some of the best memories I have. And I'm still very dear friends with a group of people from Barstow, California that we stay in touch with all the time. And then eventually moved and after graduating high school, went to college up at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And that's where I got my degree from. And ironically, my mom was a nurse. So I kind of wanted to stay in the healthcare industry. So I got my degree in behavioral science and health and was going to be a hospital administrator.
Yeah.
So after doing an internship at a hospital for a few months, I'm like, I absolutely do not want to do this the rest of my life. So there I was, graduated college, have a degree in a field that I wanted nothing to do with. So, and at the time I was a maintenance man, so we'll get into that a little bit later, how we progressed through all that. So, and then I have two kids, like you mentioned, Morgan. She's married and has three kids, but she also practices real estate as a realtor, and I'm her broker. Ironically, I've got a couple agents. I do that not as a primary source of business, but as a secondary source. And then my son is a graphic designer, and he and his wife just had their first child. So pretty exciting times.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. And bike, you mentioned, or I said in your introduction that you like to ride a bike. Is that bicycle or
Yeah,
motorcycle?
bicycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was getting up there in weight and age and my knees and all that other stuff. So people recommended I start biking, and I did with a group of friends. And oh gosh, about 2 weeks ago, I went to Chico, California for this big organized cycling event. There's probably 2,000 cyclists. It's not a race; it's just a ride in the country, and it's beautiful. I signed up to do 60 miles, which for me was a stretch. But my friends were doing the Century Ride, the 100 miles.
Oh, wow.
So they said, "Why don't you join us on part of ours?" And I ended up doing about 83 miles that day when I was only planning to do 60.
Yeah.
So for me, it was an accomplishment because I
Yeah.
wasn't in shape to even do the 60. So to pull it off, I didn't pass away. I'm still alive.
Love
So
it.
I felt
Love
pretty
it.
good about that.
That's awesome. Glenn, what's a funny story that your family likes to tell about you that you'd be willing to share today?
Oh my gosh. Probably the ones that I embarrass myself and others on. I remember one time my wife Heidi and I were traveling and we were at an international airport. And I don't know what happened, but they had us kind of get off the airplane because of some reason, and they shuffled us all into one area. And as I was sitting there waiting for them to clear the plane or do whatever they were doing, I don't know. I was sitting on this metal table, and the table had one of those breakaway things. So as I
Oh,
sat
yeah.
on it, I totally fell through this table. The table's tipped over. I fell right on my back. My
Oh,
feet are up in
no.
the air, and I'm like, oh my gosh! And so the entire airport came to a complete hush because all they can hear is this huge crash
Yeah.
and this crazy man laying on his back. And my wife looked at me and completely disowned me and walked away out of embarrassment, like she didn't even know me. And so, and ironically, later on that trip, we were getting to where we were going, and I had my suitcase on the escalator, and we were going down, but I turned around to talk to my wife and I let go of my suitcase thinking it was okay. And it just thump, 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 thump. And again, my poor wife, she's like, I don't even know you. I don't even know you. So just walk 10 feet in front of me, and
That's
believe it or
awesome.
not. So traveling with me could be a little adventurous. I don't do it on purpose. It just happens.
So tell us how the business come about, and at what
Yeah.
point did you have the confidence you could run your own business?
That's a great question. And it started off really, it's kind of a long story. I won't go into all the detail, but while I was going to college, I was a maintenance man at an apartment complex.
Hmm,
And my wife at the time got a job as a leasing consultant. And while I was going to school, she was a leasing agent, and they said, we're behind on work orders. Would I kind of had some maintenance skills. I worked at a gas station when I was a kid, and
sure.
uh, and just little things here and there. But I said, yeah, I can help. So, I was picking up trash and picking up dog dookie and, shoveling walks and doing small stuff, fixing burners and stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually I noticed that people that I kind of wanted to be more like, they were in the office, right?
Hmm,
They were talking on the phone and they were doing these tours. And I'm like, hey, how can I, work in the office? And they're like, oh, well, aren't you the maintenance man? I'm like, yeah, but I could answer the phone and show some apartments. And I'm like, go back to work. Give me the time of day. So short time later, they had a contract that they got where they needed a part-time manager and a part-time maintenance guy. It was only 60 units. It
Hmm,
was not very big. Couldn't afford a full-time manager or even a full-time manager. So I did both
okay.
in exchange for living on site, right? So I'm like, I'll take it. I was all
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah.
And then as I grew to do that, I had a lot of success. So they asked if I wanted to kind of help solve another problem on another apartment complex that was struggling. So I kind of did that. And eventually I thought, man, I really want to do what that person does, which is kind of like be the boss over multiple apartments. And
Yeah.
like, but weren't you a maintenance guy? And don't you you're on 60 units, right? I'm like, yeah. So long story short, eventually got enough experience and moved from that little position to the director of operations to that company. But it was a small company. So, and we'll get into this a little later, my boss cut me loose and fired me.
Hmm,
And I was the director of operations. I'm like, what did I do wrong? He's like, you know what? You should be at a much larger property. You need to spread your wings. I'm
wow.
like, so you're firing me? Yeah. He's like, you're so comfortable that if we leave you here, you may never leave.
Wow.
My boss is very insightful. He's like, I'm content. This company's only as big as it's going to get, but you're going to outpace
Wow.
us. I'm like,
Wow.
so you're going to fire me? I just couldn't wrap my head around. You're going to fire me? And sure enough, he was right. I got another job a very short amount of time later, also as a director of operations at a company that was double the size.
Hmm,
And now I was learning development and tax credit and property management. And it was a great, great experience that I
wow.
learned. And
Yeah.
then later got recruited to go work for Equity Residential, which has like 200,000 units, and it moved me to the Pacific Northwest. So I kind of grew up as a maintenance man and then through the industry in the apartment industry on the management side.
Yeah.
And eventually Tim owned my own property management company. But once again, it was like, how can I be that guy? Why? I mean, that
Yeah.
guy owns the apartments. How do I be him?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you're just a property manager. I'm like, yeah. And then that was their whole, you got to have money to make money.
Hmm,
Right. So long story, but I started off as a maintenance man, and I'll give you the end result. I eventually owned 7,000 units of my own.
wow.
And so people are like, how in the world did you do that? And it's a super long story. So I don't, I mean, I don't know if we have time to get into it on your show today, but you know, challenging ups and downs,
Hmm,
and as a matter of fact, some people say to me, you ought to write a book because that's like the American dream.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I can't even talk very well. How am I going to write very well? And they say, no, So believe it or not, got a book out called The Maintenance Man to Millionaire. And for a
Awesome.
while, it was on Amazon's #1 bestseller list. And
Oh,
it
that's
was fun,
fantastic.
easy
Yeah.
read, but it talks about the successes and the failures that we
For
that
you.
we had in business, and what it took to get from A to B.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Maintenance Man to Millionaire. Ooh,
Nice.
I don't know. So it won't zoom on it, but yeah. But yeah, so kind of that's how I got started, Tim. And
Very cool. Very
it
cool.
was
So tell us a little bit more about the company. What's the
okay.
name? What do you do? How do you help folks?
Yeah, so Obsidian Capital, we're a syndication firm out of Austin, Texas. We own properties up in the down DFW, down near San Antonio, here in Austin area. We've done some ground up development, but we mostly buy, Class B apartment complexes, that workforce housing. And we have stuff in Kentucky and Alabama. My
Okay.
business partner, Mike, and I own the company 50-50. We use relationships that we have to find good opportunities, but we generally syndicate our deals. So investors come together with us. We give them a preferred return on their
Mm,
investment. And if they don't get that preferred return, then we don't make any money.
okay.
So you make money, we make money.
Oh, great.
We
Yeah.
make money, we make nothing and work for free. So we're pretty motivated to get our
Yeah.
investors, and the more they make, the more we make.
Yeah.
So, so we're really motivated to make sure you get a great return. But I will share with you one story. I remember the very first 200 unit deal that we were trying to put together. We had to raise $1 million.
Hmm.
And in today's world, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but when you're doing it for the first time,
Right.
like 90% of the people ask me, hey, have you done this before? And I'm like, I've been in property management for years. They're like, no, have you ever syndicated a deal? I'm like, no, this is my first. All excited. Like, we'll pass.
Yeah, right.
So 90% of the people told us no. But here's the thing, Tim, is for every person that told us no, I said, well, do you know anybody that might?
Mm,
Right. So strike one.
yeah,
And they'd give me a name of two or three people, and I'd call them, strike out, strike out. But
sure.
guess what? Eventually, we raised the money.
Yeah.
And on my first deal, it was a 40% IRR, a 40 IR, which is a tremendous return.
Yeah. Wow.
So all the people that told me no, what do you think I did? I circled back with them. I said, I know it's my first deal, but check this out. And I
Yeah.
showed them how much we paid for the apartments and how much we sold them for. And they're like, well, do you have any more?
Yes. Nice.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden we were kind of off to the races. And that was technically my second deal. The very first deal I ever did was I had a mentor. His name is John Gibson. We were both donating our time to the apartment association because it's made up of a bunch of volunteers. 3:19 p.m. Oh gosh, someone's talking to me. And John, I went to him and I said, John, I'm looking at this little apartment complex. I kind of want to be like you because he owned a lot of really nice stuff. I mean, he's
Okay.
one of those guys.
Yeah.
Look, he's like, that's probably an okay deal. He's like, but I got a better deal for you. Why don't I sell you my little deal in Puyallup, Washington? People have never heard of Puyallup, Washington, but it's near Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
And I said, tell me about it. And he told me about it. I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a great deal. He's like, look, I'll carry a note back. You need to come up with $150,000 down payment, and
Mm.
I'll carry a note back for the rest. I'm like, that sounds fantastic. I'm thinking, I don't have $150,000. I might as well have $100 million. I don't know. So I went to my boss and a vendor and I said, hey, do you guys want to buy this deal? Here are the numbers. It's going to be a moneymaker. We could split it a third, a third, a third. And they're thinking, hey, I have that kind of money. Like, well, how much do you need? And I said, 150. You put up 75 and you put up 75. And they're like, well, that means you put up zero. I'm like, I'm the guy that found the deal. And I said, yeah, I found the deal. You put up the money and we'll split it a third, a third. And I said, I won't take anything that you can make. That was my very first deal. We sold it probably a year, 18 months later
Yeah.
for about a little over $1 million more than we paid for it.
Oh, wow. That's
So
awesome.
we got our 150 grand back and paid, made another $1 million. So it worked out really good. That's when you really start thinking, oh, I want to figure out how to do this,
Yeah. Yeah, for
and
sure.
nothing else. So
Yeah. So, Glenn, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. So, tell us about one of your biggest challenges over the years and someone who came alongside you and helped you through it.
yeah. So I mentioned John, right? That was the first guy, the mentor that sold me my very first deal. And I think that people should have mentors in an industry,
Mm.
people that have walked the walk before and can talk the talk. And also, if they're really good friends and true mentors, they'll also tell you about all the mistakes they've made along the way.
Yeah.
Because you read self-help books and you talk to people, even probably on this show, a lot of talk about all the successes, but really some of the success comes by just not hitting a pothole,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and like what should I avoid in the failures? And that's what these mentors, John did that for me, uh, Dale, the guy that cut me loose and fired me
Hmm.
is one of those that saw more in me early on in my career than I even saw in myself.
Yeah.
And those kind of people, Tim, are the ones you want to surround yourself with
Yeah.
because they will encourage you. They'll like John didn't have to sell me that deal. He just did it
Right.
because he wanted
Yeah.
me to be successful like him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, finding mentors, the people like John, the people like Dale, and you surround yourself with them will do great.
Yeah. That's awesome. So is there a specific challenge that you faced that one of those guys helped you through? And it, would just love to hear a little bit of the context if that makes
Yeah. So, when John told me he was going to sell that first deal, he knew that I didn't have any money.
ah
Right. So that was, he knew that would be a challenge. And honestly, the $150,000 down payment he wanted for this little 44 unit apartment complex, once we gave it to him, you know what he said to me, Tim? He's like, it's not for me. He's like, I wanted to make sure you had enough working capital as a
ah
rainy day fund. And I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? He's like, take the 150, put
wow.
it in the deal, fix all the problems, and I'll still carry a note back
Wow.
for you, right?
Yeah.
Because he knew from experience that if I raised enough money for the down payment, I might not have enough money
Mm.
to do all
Yeah.
the repairs and fixing. And,
Right.
and it was a small complex, but it would had a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And he knew that,
That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
So with that knowledge came, or with that experience came knowledge that he then passed on to me.
Yeah.
And I have carried that knowledge, that experience in my career today. So now I've done 30, plus transactions of various sizes, smallest being a 50 unit deal, but the largest being a 650 unit deal. And then also through a relationship from a guy named Ed, he sold me 1,500 units on a handshake because we were friends for 10 years.
Wow.
And when I was young, he was about 70, and I said, I'd like to buy your apartments from you someday. He's like, I will never sell. I'm like, well, let's just be friends. So we were friends and talked and shared experiences. But when he turned 80, something happened to him. He got a little sick and he
Mm.
called me. He's like, hey, Glenn, does that offer still stand? This is a decade later. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about, Ed? He's like, 10 years ago, you offered to buy my company. Do you still want to do that? I'm like, yeah. He's like, I've got 1,500 units over 8 apartment complexes in DFW. I'll sell them all to you. I said, will you sell them to me on a 6 cap? And he's like, yes. So, we just backed into the number. We got his operating statements, and he had owned them for 15, 20 years. So he owned them a long time. So he had a lot of equity in there.
Yeah.
That really put me on the map, Tim. I mean, you
That's
buy
awesome.
1,500
Wow.
units,
Yeah.
everybody knows who you are in DFW because those brokers that wanted those listings didn't get them. The
Right.
ones that
Yeah.
wanted to sell that, those wanted that business from Ed. And when Ed said, Glenn's buying my deals, they're like, Glenn who? Glenn Gonzales. And he put me in touch with so many people. Well, we renovated all them and sold them eventually and did fantastic on the numbers, but we spread it out amongst 3 or 4 different brokers when we were getting ready to sell those. And all those brokers became our friends.
Yeah. Right.
Now they call me and like,
Yeah.
Glenn, the deal, right? So Tim, if you can kind of see the trajectory here, it was relationships with John
Yeah.
that got me my first deal. It was Ed Springman that sold me 1,500 units that put us on the map, sold me, 8 deals. And it was just relationships,
Yeah.
long-term relationships that I had been developing for years,
Yeah.
um, that really paved the way for success. And it's hard for me to even talk about how much effort you put in relationships,
Mm.
but it's hard to quantify that. Really, I mean, you invest in the time in the relationships. You get to know people that are successful. Surround yourself with successful people.
Yeah.
And like I told you earlier, I always wanted to be like that guy over there
Yeah.
because it inspired me to do great things.
Yeah. And you've arrived. You've become that guy multiple times.
Yeah, yeah.
So Glenn, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I know you've mentioned a few people, so the spotlight is to pick 3 people in your business owner journey that you're most grateful for their help in your business's growth. So who are those
Yeah.
3 people and how they help you?
So at the top of that list is Mike Woodfield. Mike Woodfield is my business partner today.
Hmm.
He is 10, let's see, what, 20 years younger than I am, and smart as can be. Like his analytical skills are above mine. I've got a lot of experience, but he is smart as can be. And so when you mix, very intelligent people that are driven with a lot of experience, it's a formula for success.
Yeah,
So Mike has been there alongside me for this journey. And honestly, Tim, couldn't do it without him
that's
at the
awesome.
end of the day.
Yeah,
It
that's
might bring tears to my eyes with all the gratitude I feel towards this man,
I love it.
because he's just
Yes.
really good. We've been through thick and thin together in hard times, and he is steady as can be.
Yeah.
Um, so there's one, right? The other one is probably a group of attorneys, believe it or not, that when they were starting off with their law firm, we were kind of starting off with our real estate firm, and they were doing real estate transactions.
Okay.
And we're like, what will you charge us if you help us syndicate the deal? So partnership agreements, private placement memorandums, title review, negotiate the purchase sale agreement. Because in the commercial world, they're not standard forms,
Right.
they're
Right.
complicated forms. And they jumped in, and they were very affordable.
Mm.
They really, honest to goodness, helped us. And uh, we have done with them probably 35 transactions,
Okay.
maybe more, because they helped us on the purchase and the sale. So really, that's 2 transactions per deal.
Right. Right.
So we
Yeah.
could be pushing 70, to be honest with you. And they've been on this journey with us the whole time. What a relationship, and these are guys now we go to dinner with.
That's awesome.
We
What's the
become
name of the
friends.
company?
It's called Patel Gaines.
Okay. Yeah.
Patel. So Grant Gaines and Raul Patel are fantastic friends and great resources in the commercial real estate
Yeah.
field.
Wonderful.
So there's that. There's a bunch of people that are probably equally tied for third place, because you said three.
Yep.
But we also got a hold of a title company
I
that,
told you that it was going to be hard, right? To only pick.
yeah, yeah, because then there's going to be all these people. What about me? We have a regional manager that works with us that we couldn't do without Josie. We have Vivi. Vivi came in as our transaction manager, but she was an intern from the
Okay.
University of Texas, and she was a single gal. We saw her get married. She's on her third child. She has now become our partner. So she started as an intern, and Vivi has been here with us, not from the beginning, but she came in midstream,
Okay.
but is so dedicated and loyal that every time Mike and I syndicate a deal, we make her a partner on it. Not because she buys into it, like we take it out of our pocket, that ownership,
Wow.
and give it to her, and she gets a percentage of everything we get just for being with us.
Yeah.
Golden handcuffs, though, right? We're like,
Yeah.
but Vivi, you got to stay with us forever.
Yeah.
So you only get it if you're here. If you leave, you don't get it.
Yeah.
So you got to be here when it's due, right?
Yeah.
So
Love it. Yeah.
and then Deb runs all of our accounting, and then Carter runs all of our underwriting. So we have this little team, but all of them contribute to our success. So I'm sorry, Tim, I can't limit it to three.
Well, we did. Number three was your team. So
Yeah, there you go.
it's one. Yeah.
Yeah, they count as one.
Glenn, what's been your biggest learning as a business owner?
Oh, there's so many. Can I start with maybe a couple of failures?
Yeah, of course.
So we and they were hard lessons to learn, but we owned some deals that were down south near the coast. And when COVID hit, a lot of our tenants worked at these big factories, these chemical factories. The chemical factories shut down because of COVID. So they weren't paying their rent. The federal government passed some laws that if it's a Fannie or a Freddie loan, I couldn't go evict them, because of COVID, right? So we couldn't evict them. We had people living there, not paying their rent, unemployed. And, the federal government's like, okay, well, you got to make your mortgage payment. I'm like, but they're not paying their rent.
Right.
So they said, well, we'll give you some deferral, some forbearance.
Yep.
And we'll let you not make 3 mortgage payments. Right. But you know how long COVID lasted, right?
Yeah, right. Yes.
And at the end of the 3 months, they're like, okay, now you got to start repaying us. Plus, you got to pay back the first month that we gave you. So now I got to make two mortgage payments. I'm like, but I don't have any money.
Yeah.
So ironically, Tim, about a year before all that occurred, we went to our equity partner and we said, it's time to sell. We think that we've reached the max and there's going to be some layoffs coming with these industries and we need to sell. And we did a little presentation and we used one of those little buttons that had the word sell on it and it hit it buzzes. That was part of our PowerPoint presentation as equity firm. And we said, it's time to sell. And then we hit the little button and they're like, we want to hold on a little longer. And we're like, I don't think that's a good idea. So, I guess one of my lessons that I learned is even though you're an expert in the market, we have our thumb on the pulse. We know what's going on.
Yeah.
If our equity makes a bad decision to not let us sell when it's time to sell, there's consequences to that. So after that, they held on. We held on. COVID hit. It got worse and worse and worse. They lost all their equity. We had to give the property back to the bank.
Oh,
And people don't like to talk about that in this industry, but it happens.
of course.
And
Yes.
that was, 6 years, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So, we've bounced back. We're still buying. We're still doing okay. And it's not the end of the world, but I learned a very valuable lesson that sometimes if there's indicators, we need to listen to the indicators. And sometimes we ignore them as business people, or we don't want to face them.
Yeah.
And it could be staff we don't want to get rid of out of fear of retaliation or, oh no, we can't do it.
Yeah.
It could be we need to change product. We don't want to because we're so comfortable. It could be software updates. We don't want to move away from certain software and into new software. Various reasons in various businesses.
The staff one comes up a lot in my world in terms of working with clients. Of usually, you have a gut instinct that says, this relationship isn't working out and we need to part ways. But then we all wrestle with but maybe we can, if we spend a couple more months, maybe we'll turn it around.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll get better. Or I don't want to have to do that work myself anymore. Right? And then we just hang on to a bad relationship.
Yeah, along those lines, remember how I was talking about Mike Woodfield, my business partner, and I kind of got emotional.
Yeah.
I remember one time we had the president of our property management company, and at this time we were managing maybe 8,000 apartments, 9,000 apartments, 6,000 of them were ours, and then we did some fee management for other clients to the tune of about 3,000 units, and it was a pretty good sized organization. We're in Austin, they were based up in Dallas, and we also had a portfolio in the Pacific Northwest. And I got a lot of feedback about the president of this company, how his alcoholism was really affecting the business. And he wasn't showing up to work. He was missing work, coming in late. He was making bad business decisions. And the feedback kept coming. And I kept procrastinating. And Mike Woodfield, my business partner, was like, Glenn, you know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
You just aren't doing it.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, but he's like, no buts. He's like, for every but you give me, I'm going to give you a reason why. And you already know the reasons why. And I said, you don't just show up one day and terminate the president of your company. And, he didn't have any ownership, so that made it a little bit easier. But Mike was right.
Yeah.
And absolutely right. And so I took his advice and through prayer, because I'm a man of faith, and with some courage and encouragement from my business partner, went and made that change. And it was the absolute right decision. Ironically, the gentleman that we let go, he went to a couple other companies, but eventually passed away.
Oh.
And it's a sad story, but he would have passed away under our umbrella if we had not made that change. I mean, he probably was alive another couple of years afterwards and worked for various different companies. And
it's a tough decision, right? But
the human element that we work with is very complicated.
And so kudos to Mike, because that's what we guide our clients on too, is you have to separate the emotion from the business decision, and make the business decision and then deal with the emotion. Right. And oftentimes what I see is it might take a few weeks for the emotion to catch up to the business decision, right?
Yeah.
So the owner's ready to do it, but oftentimes our gut tells us way before our head and our heart are ready to listen.
Yeah. I bet you as a coach, you probably see that all the time,
Yeah.
especially as you're involved with several different businesses across the platform. It's probably one common denominator that all business owners struggle with.
And a phrase that we use to just to help that conversation is hire slow, fire fast,
Yeah.
because it costs too much money to keep a poor performing employee, regardless of the relationship, right? It has to be a business decision, and then you manage the relationship side, and right. And we work with some business partners who are husband and wife, so that's even harder, right? If a family
Yeah.
member has to be
Oh,
the
yeah.
that's let
Yeah.
go, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Glenn, what piece of advice would you have or guidance for business owners who are feeling discouraged or frustrated in their business, or maybe even a principle that you've developed over the years to provide some guidance and direction for those folks?
Yeah. I think the advice that I would give is to surround yourself with good, knowledgeable people that are friendly, that have like-minded in the industry,
Mm,
because we're all going to come through challenges. And when you have people that are kind of boosting you up and giving you the encouragement, they're the people that you've surrounded yourself with. And if you're doing it alone, um, it's going to be very difficult, no matter what your business you are in.
yeah,
And there's lots of organizations for just business owners.
sure,
There's
yeah,
people within the industry. It could even be your competitor, because good people want to see you succeed.
yes,
Bad people want to see you fail.
yeah,
So I'm very good friends with some of my own competitors. And they give me encouragement. I give them encouragement,
yeah,
not because we're going to steal each other's business, but we want each other to be successful.
yeah.
And the other piece of advice I have, Tim, would be to just never give up.
Mm,
We have these standards in our company. Let me see if I can find them real quick. That we actually spell out the word standards, and one of those is like show you care is the first one
mm,
on standards.
yeah,
And I won't go through all of them because we just don't have time. But show you care, do it now.
yeah,
Uh, that empowerment.
yeah,
So have a set of standards that you can also reflect back on as part of your core
yes.
business beliefs.
Yeah.
If you don't have them, it's like, what direction are you really going?
Yeah.
What are
I
you
love
standing
I
for?
love that how you called it business belief. So that higher slow idea that I said earlier is it's so important to find people who are a cultural fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who
Yeah,
believe in the same standards that you believe in, because we know those folks are going to be long-term fits for our company
yeah,
if they're aligned culturally.
yeah. This Friday we're taking all of our team members on a team building event, and each we try and go a quarter, sometimes every quarter, sometimes it doesn't happen that frequently,
Yeah.
but a different team member will pick the event.
Okay.
So some of the things have been pickleball.
Yeah.
Some we're going to Top Golf this Friday.
Okay.
The other one is an escape room.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, get your team together. And there's a philosophy that we have, and Mike and I really adhere to this. But we want the place of business work to be a place that people want to come to,
Mm,
not because they need a paycheck, not because they have to. I mean, we
that's
that's any
awesome.
job.
Yeah.
We want them to come here because of our environment and our culture, and that we show appreciation. So
And
be
when you get that
grateful.
right, you then have long-term loyalty, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like Vivi, right? Vivi started as an intern. She
Yeah.
didn't even have a husband. She got a husband, and we made fun of him when they were dating, and then she's got three kids. And it's like we were the dad interviewing some kid that wanted to court our daughter.
Yeah, yeah.
But they're like family now. So it's
That's
awesome.
awesome. That is. Hey, Glenn,
Yeah.
when you think about the next, couple of years, what's your number one focus or priority challenge that you're going to need to resolve to achieve
Yeah.
your long-term goals?
It's funny, Tim, you asked that question because just this afternoon, my business partner, Mike, and I put on the calendar that we're going to do a partners retreat, just he and
Sure.
I.
Yeah.
We're going to ask, and one of the agendas is like, how much money do we want to make, by when, and
Yeah.
how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
And we're not taking our laptops or cell phones or anything. We're just going to sit in a room and dream about what our dreams are,
Yeah.
and how much money we're going to make, and how we're going to make it, and
Yeah.
with what team.
Yeah.
And where is it going to be? In Kentucky, Alabama, here in Texas? I mean, what does it look like? And when do you want to retire? With
Yeah.
how much money in the bank? So we're we do this once a year, by the way. So it's not like
Yep.
it's a new thing, but we try and do it kind of mid-year. So it's not January, it's not December, but mid-year.
Yep.
And then we can look back on our last year's goals to see what we accomplished.
That's
So,
awesome.
you know, in my industry right now, Tim, we're in a kind of a downward trajectory with real estate values coming down,
Yep.
which, any businessman would know: buy low, sell high, right?
Hmm.
So the values are coming down. We want to go gobble up as much real estate as we can possibly touch right now. And there's stuff that's getting foreclosed on. And there's
Mm,
stuff that's being, and investors are being wiped out. We're offering on those deals. If
nice.
they're hairy, broken, previous owners lost money, that's our deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
bought 241 units in Birmingham, Alabama, right? There was the seller was kind of in trouble,
Okay.
up against a bridge loan with no equity left to
Mm,
refinance and get out of it. So we bought it,
nice.
and so next couple years we're going to acquire during a downward market.
Hmm.
Cap rates are up and they're going to come down. Interest rates are up, they're going to come down.
Yep.
But we're going to find a way to structure and buy those now, knowing that it's going to go down. That's part of our plan. We got that. We got that figured out.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And
I
then we're
love.
going to make some money. We're going to
Yeah.
sell it when it gets better. What if it doesn't get better? We're in trouble, but our basis will be lower than the previous guys. So,
Right.
and we do raise enough money for a rainy day fund. We've learned that lesson
Yep.
earlier on.
Yep.
So,
Yep. You shared that. Yeah. So the planning, I love that you guys do that annually, right? The whole concept Stephen Covey talks about, right? Begin with the end in
one of
mind.
my favorite books, right? Yeah.
Yep.
The
So
Seven
having that
Habits. And
clarity of when are you going to retire, how much money do you need, and therefore what does the business need to make in order to pay for that retirement? It's awesome.
yeah. Yeah. So
Too
there
many,
you
too
go.
many times I see that folks don't, you mentioned dreams a couple of times, right? That if we don't have a life dream, then we don't have the motivation to push ourselves through the challenging business times, right? But
Yeah.
we've got that
Yeah.
clarity on why, right? It allows us to push harder and make the business achieve the things that it needs to pay for those dreams.
Yeah. I want to spend time with my family. I like to hunt. Mike and I went hunting in South Africa twice. He
Nice.
just got back from the Masters like 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
So it's like, I mean, we work hard and we want to enjoy some of that with the people we love.
Yeah. One of the things that we say within Action Coach is business should give you more life.
Yeah.
And too often business is sucking the life out of business
Yeah.
owners, right?
Yeah.
It's not how it's supposed to be. And so, right, getting the
There
business,
should be some benefits to all the stress,
right?
right?
Yes, because as business owners, we're taking on a lot of risk, right? You
We
talked
do.
about that already. And so if and responsibility and burden and right and having to have cover payroll every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? If we're going to assume all that burden, then we certainly the business should be giving us back, a return on
Yeah.
that stress investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, last question, Glenn. Jim Rohn, one of his quotes is, "We become the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with." So, as you think about that, what advice would you have for business owners who are kind of staying in isolation and doing it on their own?
Yeah. So I would suggest that you find ways to network within the industry.
Mm,
I donate some time. I speak at conferences, not for money, but for just to be around other successful people. I do podcasts like this. When you're like, hey, would you like to come on a podcast? I try and do that as often as I can with as many people as I can, because when I'm out there and I'm around successful people, they rub off on me.
yeah,
And if you're a little introverted, it's very difficult to get out there and force yourself to go out and network with people,
yeah,
even in uncomfortable situations, whether it's a big group or a little group. One of the conferences that I attend each year is called the National Multifamily Housing Conference, and there's probably 8,000 attendees.
wow,
And then I also go to these little meetups that there are 10 people.
yeah,
And believe it or not, I was at this meetup that I met our CPA, probably 12 years ago.
okay,
We were just chit chatting, and he's a CPA, does tax returns for real estate professionals. I'm
okay.
like, really? So, Dale and I got the chit chatting, and I'm like, what do you charge? And he told me, I'm like, do you do K1s to all the investors? He's like, I do it all. I'll send out their K1s. I'll file your federal tax returns. I'll help you project. We do cost segregation and depreciation. And I'm like, dude, we need to talk. So I met him at a little meetup.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, at one evening at a hamburger place, and he's been with us doing our tax returns and now my personal tax returns for like a decade. So yeah,
You just
get out
never
there,
know
guys.
where a
Get out there and
conversation.
meet people,
Yeah,
even
you
if it's
never know
not
where it's going to
comfortable.
lead, right?
You don't know where it's going to lead,
Yeah.
And yeah, we've met people that have said, "Yeah, we're gonna go fishing," and they're like, "Want to go?" I'm like, "Of course." Like, how about we pick you up in our airplane? I'm like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "You have an airplane." I'm like, "You have an airplane? You're gonna take us with you?" Like, yeah, let's do it.
Right.
So you're out there, right? You're out there, and then you realize that there's just a lot of good people that want you to be successful.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, there's bad people out there that want to see you fail, but there's
Yeah.
more good people that want you to be successful in business. And you find and hang out with those business people, and it'll inspire you to do great things.
And those folks understand the idea of abundance, right? There's more than enough to go around, so we don't have to compete with each other, right? We can collaborate and share best
Yeah.
practices and help each other become better versions of ourselves, right?
Yeah. We have some competitors that I met at a conference in, gosh, I want to say it was Las Vegas or Dallas or something. And we just we got to be friends with them.
Mm.
And they called us one time, like, Glenn, we found this 258 unit deal out of state, and the most we've done is 20 or 30. Like, do you want to go in on it with us? I'm like, what do you have in mind? They're like, well, we found the deal. Do you want to raise the equity and we'll split everything 50-50? I'm like, so as co-sponsors? And we love these guys.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we just co-sponsor it somehow. I'm like, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because we like them. Dude, it has been the best deal we've ever done.
That's awesome.
And,
Wow.
and it, you can go on our website and read about it, yeah, it closed on it, bought it, great returns to our investors. Probably the highest one we've got. Wasn't even our deal.
Wow.
But we teamed up with one of our competitors
Yeah.
of like-minded people, and together bought a 258 unit deal that we would not have had access to.
I love it. Glenn, it sounds like you've been blessed with some incredible people that have been part of your journey. If they were all here on the show today, what would you want to say to them?
Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for enlightening me on things. And, to all those guys that I've done business with, it's like, thank you for trusting us too.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. Say again, what's the name of your book?
Oh, Maintenance Man to Millionaire.
Yes.
And it's on Amazon, by the way. You can just type in Glenn Gonzales or Maintenance Man to Millionaire. It'll pop up. It's got a guy with a hammer on his head.
Love
He's
it.
a maintenance man in a suit.
That's awesome. Glenn, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Tim, I had a blast. Thank you for allowing me to do this with you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Self-Made is a Myth show. Please help spread this movement by liking and subscribing to our show and following us on Facebook and LinkedIn. To join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. Okay, folks, that's a wrap. Please pay it forward and be sure to tune in next time to the Self-Made is a Myth podcast.